unless you understand the 5 things you can do to survive the short-term ban here in Dallas, Texas. And all I gotta say is, as a short-term rental owner myself, this is going to affect me, especially with my properties in Dallas, and I'm not happy about this at all. And before we get to the 5 things that are gonna help you survive this mess with short-term rentals, I'm gonna get into a little bit of the backstory and what's going on. The funny thing is that several of you were commenting out there that Dallas is going to ban Airbnb. You saw it coming. I was watching the news. I didn't think it was going to happen this fast because in January of 2023, they had just increased the hot tax or the hotel occupancy tax by 2%. So before I was paying 7% hot tax, it went up to 9%. I know that was a significant bump in revenue for the city of Dallas. And so I assumed by bumping that up in January, they were probably going to hold on to this a little bit longer. However, with some elections and things coming up, you know, there's always pressure to make some of these decisions sometimes sooner rather than later. And you'll notice if it's an off election cycle, things will drag out. If it's near an election cycle, they're going to go one way or the other. But otherwise, there's a lot of complaints from residents about these short-term rentals going on in the residential neighborhoods, which is what has brought this all to light. It's funny though, right? Something like this, they can get pushed through very quickly, but whenever the community speaks out about things being taught in the schools or certain agendas or other things getting pushed, the community doesn't really matter at that point. But whenever it comes to entrepreneurs and business owners, we're seeing a trend of this lately as to where the local governments, especially federal governments, are stepping in very quickly to regulate or overall ban opportunities for people to make additional income. And I know a lot of people that may just have 1 or 2 short-term rentals, and it is supplementing, if not helping, with a significant portion of their income. So this isn't just a lot of corporations this is going to affect. This is something else that people are pushing towards the argument of, is that, well, these corporations are coming in here and buying all the single family homes and just turning them into short-term rentals. And I don't believe that is the case. There's a lot of people, a lot of mom and pop shop owners, you could say, which is your next door neighbor, you know, your mom and your pop, your brother, your sister. You know, I myself, I'm not a large corporation. I have some Airbnbs here and there, which does help out supplement. Actually, I made a video not too long ago about how just one house in Dallas is going to pay for not only that property, but the property I'm in now, and how that can impact somebody's life. Now, I'm doing okay financially, but there's a lot of people out there that are struggling quite a bit, and this is going to impact those individuals significantly. So what are the 5 things you can do? We'll jump into that here in a minute, but let me cover a little bit of the background on this. By the way, my name is Levi Lassick with the Living in Dallas, Texas team, and if you want to know everything there is about living in Dallas, Texas, make sure you subscribe so you can be the first to learn about the current market here in Dallas, Texas. And if you're thinking about moving in 9 days or 9 months, either way, just give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email, or schedule a Zoom, our personal favorite. Happy to help you make a smooth move to Dallas. Now, you're seeing this across the nation as a whole right now. They are coming in and banning these short-term rentals in a lot of cities. Even California, I don't know the full story, but I know a year or 2 ago, they were trying to ban 1099 workers, which was going to get rid of the entire gig economy. I think that got overturned as far as I know, but that's something that just blows my mind, why they are getting rid of people's ability to earn additional incomes, especially in this day and age when inflation is at all-time highs, prices are at all-time. I mean, have you tried to buy a dozen eggs lately? And if you don't buy the cheapest of the cheap eggs, which are still way more than they were just 6 to 12 months ago, it is absolutely ridiculous. Credit card debt is at an all-time high as well. Consumer debt at an all-time high because people's dollar is not going as far as it did just even over a year to year and a half ago. But now Dallas is jumping on board. And the one thing I've liked about Dallas is Dallas, even though it is a blue city, it seems to be a little bit more conservative than Austin, Houston, and a lot of the other metro cities around the US. So they're typically a little bit slower to the draw before they move on these types of things, which they're a little bit slow to the draw here as well. But at the same time, they made this decision very quickly. Now, there are going to be some appeals and things of that nature happening in court, so you will want to keep an eye out on that. This isn't supposed to go into effect until December 14th of 2023. So there is a little bit of time for you to be able to make some adjustments and find some different alternatives if the appeals do not work out. But but I would not bet on the appeals going in your favor or mine. So you might want to start looking at Plan B. Now, the decision was backed by a 12-3 vote by the City Council, and it comes as a response to numerous complaints from residents regarding the negative impacts of these rentals, particularly issues related to noise and violence. Over 1,000 short-term rentals are currently registered in single-family areas that they know of, but I'm getting conflicting reports on this. Dallas is also saying that there's over 1,800 registered with over 1,300 illegal that they know about. But if you look on Airbnb, you'll see listings of over 5,000 around the Dallas area. But I know for myself, whenever I opened up my first short-term rental in Dallas several years ago, I think within about 2 months, I got a letter in the mail with a picture of my listing on Airbnb, and they said, "Oh, hello, this is the city of Dallas. We noticed you have a short-term rental. By the way, you now owe us tax." So I know they've got people out there looking for these things, so they may just be backlogged, although they hit me pretty quickly, which I was very impressed by the way. But to have 1,300 known unregistered, or what they may say are illegal, is very interesting to me, even though there's over 5,000 listings with Airbnb just on that one website. You're not even factoring in like VRBO and maybe some of these other websites. Now, these are really going to affect short-term rentals zoned in single-family residence areas. If they're in a multifamily resident area, then they will be allowed, but only up to a 3% cap in that area. So you'll have to start looking at a density of short-term rentals in multifamily zoned locations. Now, after December 14th, if you continue to operate with these short-term rentals, Dallas is threatening lots of legal penalties and consequences. I'm not sure exactly what those are at the moment, but I'm sure it's going to be some pretty hefty fines, and then probably notices to shut down, or they will maybe put a lien or something like that, but we'll keep you up to date on what's going on. Now, before we jump into the 5 reasons that you can do to safeguard yourself against this type of ban in the Dallas area, or maybe whatever city you're watching from, then I want to cover some market data that's very interesting right now, because seasonality is going to come in effect, especially at this time. Now, here you're going to see the median sales price in Dallas County over the last 20 years. Now, what you're going to notice, I mean, you can see the seasonality throughout this entire graph over the last 20 years. Definitely a lot more steady before 2008, but even look at 2008, that was probably the lowest drop in Dallas County during that time, but still, even in 2009, it started to rise during the summer, and in the fall and winter, it starts to drop, rise during the summer, and this continues over time. Now, the most important thing you want to factor in when you're looking at decisions on whether you want to buy or not, the thing is that every time we do have an all-time or a new low, or the latest low, we could say, which is usually between December and January of the year, it's still higher than January or December of the previous year. So what that means is that homes are appreciating here in Dallas regardless. Now, anytime we've discussed this with you, you should always be looking to buy a home and hoping to hold that home over the next 3 to 5 years. Right now, they say the average is families are staying in their homes on average of 13 years right now. But ideally, if you're going to do this over 3 to 5 years, according to the trends and the way the market is going, especially over the last 20 years, you will have appreciation in that home, and you will weather any type of market crash, unless we have some astronomical crash we've never ever seen before, even worse than 2008. But you can even see, if you look on this graph, even after 2009 right there, January of 2009 was the lowest it's been in 20 years in Dallas, but it still started to bounce up and started to rebound, stayed kind of steady until 2012, but from there we started to see the increases stay extremely consistent. Now, of course, the last 2 years have been anomalies, but you've also had the highest jumps in 2022, along with some of the steepest declines through 2023. But again, look at January was that low point, but it was still higher than January of 2022, only by about $5,000, but still showing you that if you would have bought a home this time last year, you likely still have a slight appreciation value, if not break even on there. But again, most people are not buying homes to sell them 1 year later unless they have some crazy thing happen in their life, like death or divorce, or something that is unplanned anyways. Now, you could get caught in any type of market shift at any time if you are forced to sell outside of the time you are planning to sell. And that's just something that we could never ever predict. But when you look at the trends and the data, home prices are steadily going up. We've seen 2008, we've seen even this last summer with the drop here in, at the beginning of this year, but look at the increase. So from May of 2022 to January of 2023, we had a 19% decrease. Now, that's significant, but at the same time, if you didn't buy by January of 2023, we've had pretty much the same, about 19 or 17% increase during that time. So even if you would have bought, if you would have bought in January, again, if you were focusing on seasonality, you would have already had a 17% increase in your value. Now, will that drop down again? Yes, probably so, because we are moving into the fall and winter, and that's whenever home prices start to come down. And whenever they do, this is the ideal time to buy. Now, I know according to the data, they're saying we're in a seller's market because currently there's only 2.1 months of inventory in Dallas County. So that would indicate a seller's market on paper. However, because interest rates are at 7% or a little slightly above, then that is suppressing the buyer demand right now. They are still estimating we're 6.5 million homes short in the US, but it's the 7% interest rates that are really holding people back. Now, I know for us, we still get phone calls and texts every single day from people just like you that are looking to make their move regardless of what the interest rates are. You have your own situation and your own reason for why you need to move. Now, if you're planning on buying and you have flexibility, you work from home or work remotely, or you own your own business, according to the data, according to trends, over the next 4 or 5 months up through January is probably an ideal time to buy. Now, you may say, I'm not happy about the interest rates, but at the same time, sellers right now are willing to negotiate. Builders are offering concessions, even though we're seeing new construction homes really sell very quickly, at least in the North Dallas area. You're not finding a lot of new construction in the Dallas area as a whole or in Dallas County, but north of Dallas, where there's Frisco, Plano, Prosper, Salina, those areas, I know it. I see it. I'm up here all the time, every weekend, and every time I drive by all the model homes were in these communities, there's 3, 4, 5, 6 cars parked outside, people coming in, people going out. So I'm seeing boots on the ground, plus with the phone calls coming into our office, then it just doesn't seem like there is a huge slowdown for us. But even though inventory is short and this technically is a seller's market on paper, I believe there's a lot of advantages right now to the buyer, but it has to be right for you and your family and your situation. And that's why we always advise for you to give us a call or shoot us a text or send us an email or schedule a Zoom call, our personal favorite, so that we can discuss with you your current situation and see if it's the right time for you and your family. All right, so what are the 5 options you have to get through this? Is number 1, you can turn this property into a long-term rental. That's one of the simplest things you can do. Now, the problem with long-term rentals in Dallas and Dallas County is the taxes. That's what makes long-term rentals not as desirable, especially if you're just starting out and you're getting your first property. Most of the time as a investor, if you're just starting out or you're the part-time investor or you just watch some YouTube video on how to buy rental homes, you're like, okay, sweet, I'm in. I'm going to go to Dallas. And then you realize property taxes are pretty significant, especially around Dallas because of the schools. And so therefore that could cost you, based on the market rate, that you may break even or even lose a little bit. Now, there are some opportunities where you could possibly net, $100, $200, $300 or $400. That's always the ideal. We're usually looking for $400 a month in net, ideally for a long-term rental, although I'm not a big fan personally of long-term rentals. Now, here's the thing about buying homes and using them for long-term rentals. You have to lease it out one time or usually once per year, and that's pretty good. And then most of the time those people stick around, and you're getting somebody to pay down your principal, pay your interest, and pay those taxes. So even if you're breaking even, it doesn't leave you any room for repairs, which is not necessarily a good thing, especially if there's an emergency. But you are buying down that principal and you are gaining some appreciation, most likely, especially with the way things are going in Dallas. And so that is a good long-term play if you have the financial capability to weather any storms, or if you can break even and something happens, you have a little bit of emergency fund. Over the long run, long-term rentals could be very ideal. And if you can really understand your first one and make it work for you, it's pretty simple to add the second and the third, as to where I built up to 7 at once, and it was a lot. I know a lot more now than I did back then, so I do have a different viewpoint on long-term rentals, but ideally this is one of the options. All right, number 2 is you're going to turn this into a midterm rental. This is pretty popular right now because guess what? There's a lot of activity going on in Dallas. Dallas is one of the top medical districts in the country. So when you're thinking about a midterm rental, you're thinking about corporate relocation, you're talking travel nurses, anybody that might rent this property for 30 days or longer. The thing about travel nurses, which is pretty popular, they're coming to a location for maybe 3 to 6 months, maybe 8 to 9. So guess what? This also allows you the ability to possibly rent out your property by the room. If you find 2 or 3 travel nurses and you've got a 2 or 3 bedroom, you now have the opportunity to get a midterm professional that's only going to be staying for a midterm length of stay, but could have the opportunity for long-term staying ability. But if you have 2 or 3 people that are in corporate relocation or nurses, that could be considered a good quality person to be in there. And if they're only sticking around for a short while, that gives you more time to turn it over. Plus, if you're renting it out by the bedroom, you lose one person, you're not losing 100% of your income. So say you've got a property. Now, if we use my house in Dallas, for example, one of them that is about $2,500 a month for mortgage, taxes, and insurance. Now, it's just a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house in a historic district. That's what it does have going for it. I could probably rent that home for about $2,500 a month. So I could break even on that. Now, with it being 2-bedroom, 2-bath, I might be able to rent that for $1,250 a room, possibly for midterm rental, which would get me back to $2,500. So if you're in the 2-bedroom range or 1-bedroom, one bedroom, you're pretty much going to be stuck with what you have. 2-bedroom, not necessarily ideal, but if you have a 3-bedroom, then this is where renting it out by the bedroom could become a little bit more lucrative, and it may be even more profitable. Not as profitable as a short term, which is why we all love short term, because typically with short term, I can make potentially up to 3 times the amount of the mortgage, which is why I love it so much and prefer that over long-term rentals. But midterm rentals, just depending on your area and the rate and what the corporation or the hospital or whoever's working with that temporary worker is willing to pay. All right, that brings us to number 3, which is also kind of a midterm rental option, but not a lot of people know about this one, and that's called sober living. And that is what it is. People come out of rehab and they need a place to stay. Sometimes these other sites, or they would call them halfway houses or something, they may be full or booked up, and so they're looking for alternatives. This is again a midterm rental type of situation, a rent by the room type of situation where usually one person comes out of a rehab. They need a stable environment to be in, maybe around other people so they can support each other, and they can come in and rent a room. And these sober living companies can pay a pretty significant amount because typically they can be backed up by local government or federal government for those funds. And so that could be very lucrative and also a way to turn a midterm rental and make it very profitable. All right, number 4 is going to still be in the midterm rental range and could be considered long-term rental as well, but you could get onto a site like PadSplit. PadSplit is a rent by the room type of situation, usually people looking for longer term, but also short term. Now, Dallas has defined short-term rentals as anything less than 30 days. So you'd have to rent out your room or your house for longer than 30 days to turn it into a midterm or long-term rental. So that's the stipulation. Now, with PadSplit, you have, again, individuals looking to cut down on cost. So this may not be as profitable or as lucrative because, for example, my house, again, $2,500 to rent each room for $1,200, $1,250. You could get a pretty decent apartment that way if you want to live on your own. Now, if you don't and you want somebody to co-mingle with, well, there you have the opportunity. Now, I also have a back house, but it's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. It doesn't have a kitchen sink, and so that could be a part of the room as well. I probably wouldn't be able to charge $1,200 for that, but if I was able to charge $700 or $750, then that could make the home profitable. Not as much as a short-term rental, but again, an option through something like PadSplit. But depends on who's willing to be, to walk in and out of the house whenever they need to go to the fridge or wash dishes, things like that. So that's why if you have a 3-bedroom or higher, that's probably going to be more lucrative for you unless you're in a really good area that demands a higher price. All right, number 5 is going to be sell the property. If you want to just offload it, depending on how long you've had it, and this is something that you don't even want to deal with or you don't want to work with long-term rentals, that's why that data that I just showed you earlier is so important, because selling between now and December probably not going to be the best time to sell. Now, there's going to be some buyers out there and that could be a good time for them to buy, so it may be easier to find a buyer. But if you can hold off until January or February, then that's where we're going to see prices start to typically increase and be more advantageous for the seller. So even if you're watching this video right now, we're even on the decline of this summer buying season moving into fall and winter, even though it's only August. But we saw a little bit of a price drop in July. So over the next few months up until December, not the best time to buy, but you need to calculate your equity. Is it worth it? And can you hold it for longer than that? Now, maybe you make enough money over the next 3 to 4 months that you can hold out in January, February, March, depending on what you want to do to put it on the market at that time. It really comes down to what's going to be best for you and your situation, but that's why we always recommend you give us a call, shoot us a text, or send us an email, or schedule a Zoom call so that way we can run through those calculations and numbers with you to see if this is the right time for you to sell that property. I'm still on the fence personally with my own properties there in Dallas, so I am going to be looking into some midterm rental options. If I can get some corporate staff or travel nurses in there, then that is going to be my go-to for the time being. The other option is just wait it out until you get caught, but I do not recommend that at all whatsoever. You did not hear that here, but I know from my own experience, Dallas was pretty on top of it and they found me very quickly. So if I continue to operate even past December 14th, I'm pretty sure they'll find me, but I'm also not that type of person. I typically play by the rules. I know where I can bend them here or there, but whenever it comes to government and taxes, things like that, I just prefer not to really mess around with them too much. But overall, it really comes down to what is going to be best for you and your situation. And at this point, this is going to happen by the end of the year. Again, I wouldn't hold my breath for the appeals. I would start looking at your options right now. And if you want to talk through that, we'd be happy to help you out in any way we can. So until next time, well, we hope to show you around town. Unless you understand the 5, this isn't just, this isn't supposed to go into effect until when I open up my first Airbnb in Dallas. But I know for myself, when I open up my first Airbnb, now before we jump into the 5 reasons. Now, before we jump into the 5 reasons that most of the time those people stick around, and that brings us to number 14. Don't California my Texas. That's a very common saying around here. And it's not that we're not welcoming and we don't want people to move here, but we just don't understand why